Close your eyes. The past is about to speak. When you close your eyes and think of Greek mythology, your mind probably conjures a world of shining marble, of gods with perfect bodies lounging on the clouds of Mount Olympus, sipping nectar and meddling in the affairs of men with a playful glint in their eyes. You see heroes with impossible muscles like Hercules and Achilles embarking on glorious quests, their names destined to echo through eternity. It's a world painted in gold and brilliant white, filled with adventure, passion, and divine grandeur. But that is a story told from the mountain's peak. For you, a mortal living in the shadow of that pantheon, the reality is something else entirely. It's a world painted in mud brick brown and dusty gray. It's a place where the gods are not whimsical patrons but terrifying, unpredictable forces of nature, and their attention is the last thing you ever want. Honestly, with no antibiotics, no understanding of germ theory, and a sky full of deities holding millennia-long grudges, you probably wouldn't last a week. It's a different kind of story, a more boring Greek myth for sleep, but it's your story. So, as we begin, I invite you to post your location and what time it is where you are in the world. It's always nice to know who we're sharing the quiet hours with. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Ancient stories, deeper sleep. The first thing you are aware of is not a sound, but a feeling. It's the distinct, prickly texture of straw beneath the thin wool of your sleeping mat. It's a familiar feeling, the one that has started every day of your life. The air in your small home is cool and still, thick with the lingering scent of last night's fire, a mix of wood smoke and ash that has settled into the very fabric of the walls. There's another smell, too, the deep, earthy scent of the packed dirt floor, slightly damp from the morning dew. A single, stubborn shaft of pale gray light finds its way through a small opening high in the wall, illuminating a swirling universe of dust motes. That is your sunbeam and your clock. You push aside the coarse, heavy blanket that smells of lanolin and sleep. Your home is one room, not a studio apartment with clever partitions, just a single square space that serves as your kitchen, your living room, and your bedroom. Your family sleeps around you. They're breathing a soft, rhythmic chorus in the quiet. There is no concept of personal space here, no door to close for a moment of solitude. Your life is a shared life, your every movement observed, your every sigh heard. You pull on a simple tunic, the wool scratching faintly against your skin. It's the only outfit you own, washed when you have the time and the water to spare. The hearth is cold, a small circle of stones in the center of the room with a hole in the roof above it for the smoke to escape. It is your job to tend to it. You move quietly, your bare feet cold on the hard-packed earth. You take the clay jug, its surface cool and rough under your palms, and step outside. The world is waking up with you. You can hear the distant, confident crow of a rooster, the bleating of a neighbor's goat, and the low murmur of voices from other homes, all repeating this same gentle ritual of beginning a day. The air outside is crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wild herbs from the nearby hills and the faint, metallic tang from the blacksmith, who is already at his forge on the far side of the village. Your first task is the same as every morning, a walk to the communal well. There is no tap to turn, no instant access to water. You and the other women of the village make this pilgrimage at sunrise and sunset, jugs balanced on your shoulders or hips. It is a moment of community, a time to exchange news, to gossip, to see who is well and who is not. Historians still debate the precise boundaries of a woman's world in this time, whether her life was a strict confinement to the home, or if these public tasks gave her a different kind of social power. For you, it is simply a fact of life, a chore that connects you to your neighbors. The weight of the full jug on the walk back is a familiar burden, a strain in your shoulders and back that you have grown accustomed to. Back in your home, the family is stirring. A small fire is coaxed back to life in the hearth, its fragile warmth pushing back the last of the morning's chill. Breakfast is not a grand affair. There is no coffee, no sweet juice. There is a small loaf of barley bread, dense and heavy. When you chew, you can feel the faint, gritty texture of sand from the millstone that ground the grain. It's a taste so common you no longer notice it. Alongside the bread, there is a bowl of something simple, perhaps a porridge of boiled grains or some olives from your family's small grove. Meat is a luxury saved for festivals or sacrifices, so your diet is built on what the historians call the Mediterranean triad: grains, grapes, and olives. Your bread, your watered-down wine, your precious oil. It's not exciting, but it is sustenance. Your breakfast will not win any culinary awards, but it is also unlikely to offend a passing god, which is a significant advantage. You eat sitting on low stools or perhaps just on the floor around the fire. The conversation is simple, focused on the day's tasks. Tending the small plot of land where you grow lentils and chickpeas, mending a fishing net, taking the goats to pasture, spinning wool into thread, a task that seems endless, your hands moving in a rhythm passed down through generations. Your name is not one a poet will ever sing. Your face is not one that will ever launch 1,000 ships, and that is your greatest strength. In a world where beauty attracts the predatory eyes of gods and mortals alike, your plainness is a shield. In a world where great strength or talent invites challenges and divine jealousy, your mediocrity is a cloak of invisibility. Your greatest aspiration is not to be a hero, not to be remembered, not to be special. Your greatest aspiration is to be overlooked. You pray not for blessings, which are often curses in disguise, but for silence. You want the gods to be too busy with their own dramatic affairs on Olympus to ever glance down and take notice of you. You want to live a life so unremarkable, so utterly boring, that it never becomes a footnote in one of their epic, tragic stories. You want to be born, to work, to have a family, and to die, all without ever becoming interesting. Because in your world, being interesting is a death sentence. You spend your day in the familiar rhythms of labor. If you are a woman, your hands are rarely still. There is always wool to be carded and spun, the spindle turning in a motion as constant as your own breathing. The thread you create will become the tunics, the blankets, the simple fabrics of your life. There is grain to be ground, a slow, arduous task using a heavy stone that grinds not just the barley but your own strength with it. There is the endless task of mending, of preserving what little you have. If you are a man, your body is your primary tool. You follow the ox, guiding the simple wooden plow through the rocky soil of your small plot. The sun beats down on your neck, and the smell of overturned earth fills your senses. Or perhaps you are a fisherman, your hands calloused and scarred from nets and hooks, your skin weathered by salt and wind, your life tethered to the moods of the sea. This is your world, a sphere of maybe 5 or 6 miles in any direction from your village. Beyond that, the world becomes abstract, a place of stories and rumors. You have heard of great cities like Athens or Sparta, but they are as remote and unreal to you as the moon. Your reality is this patch of earth, this cluster of homes, these few hundred people you have known your entire life. There is a comfort in this smallness, a predictability that feels like safety. Yet this safety is an illusion, a thin blanket you pull over your head to hide from the monsters you know are there. Because you know that the universe is not an empty, unfeeling expanse of stars. It is a living thing, and it is watching. Every aspect of your world is governed by a spirit, a nymph, a minor deity, or one of the great Olympians themselves. That spring you drink from, it is not just water, it is the home of a naiad, a water nymph. Offend her, perhaps by dirtying her spring or taking too much without a small offering, and the water might dry up, or worse, turn foul and bring sickness to your family. That ancient olive tree on the hill, the one that gives the best fruit, a dryad lives within its bark. Cut it down for firewood, and you have not just destroyed a tree, you have murdered a spirit and invited a terrible retribution upon yourself. So you live your life in a state of constant, low-grade negotiation with the unseen. Before you drink from the spring, you murmur a word of thanks. Before you harvest the grain, you leave a small portion of the first reaping in the field as an offering to Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. You pour out a little of your watered-down wine onto the earth before you drink, a small gift for the gods, a gesture of respect. This isn't just quaint tradition, it's a critical act of self-preservation. It's like paying a protection fee to a cosmic mafia. A quirky fact that modern people often miss is that these weren't grand, theatrical gestures. Most of these daily acts of piety were small, quiet, and personal, an ingrained habit, like saying "bless you" after a sneeze. You don't do it because you expect a great reward. You do it in the desperate hope of avoiding punishment. You have seen what happens when the gods take notice. Last year, your neighbor's prize ox, the one he boasted was the strongest in the entire region, was struck by lightning on a clear, sunny day. Everyone knew what that meant. A lightning bolt from a blue sky was no accident. It was a message from Zeus himself. Your neighbor had clearly committed some act of hubris, some boastful pride that offended the king of the gods. No one asked what he did. It was better not to know. You just averted your eyes from his misfortune and made sure your own prayers were a little more humble that night. There's another story you remember, one your grandmother told you in a hushed voice. A young woman in a nearby village famed for her beauty was washing her clothes by the river. The river god, captivated, rose from the water and tried to claim her. In her terror, she prayed to Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, for protection. Artemis, in a flash of what she might have considered mercy, transformed the girl into a reed to hide her forever from the river god's sight. The villagers would say the goddess saved her, but you think of that girl. One moment she was a living, breathing person with hopes and a family. The next, she was a plant, her consciousness trapped, swaying silently in the mud for eternity. Was that truly salvation, or was it just a different kind of destruction? It serves as a grim reminder that even a god's help can be as terrifying as their wrath. The attention of a god is like the glare of the sun. A little warmth from a distance feels pleasant, necessary for life. But to be brought too close is to be incinerated. You don't want their blessings, because a blessing makes you stand out. If your crops are too plentiful, you invite the jealousy of your neighbors and the scrutiny of Demeter. If your child is too beautiful, you court the obsessive, dangerous desire of Apollo or the petty, murderous envy of Hera. If your skill at the loom is too great, you might find yourself in a contest with Athena, and that is a contest no mortal has ever won. You see the altars in the village center, the stones dark with the stains of countless libations and the ash of sacrifices. You participate in the festivals, you chant the hymns, you do everything you are supposed to do, but you do it with a quiet fear in your heart. You are not praying out of love, you are acting out of terror. There is no concept of a loving, personal relationship with a deity. The gods are your landlords, not your friends. They are powerful, vain, and easily angered. They don't care about your soul or your moral character. They care about receiving their proper due: honor, respect, and the smoke of burning thigh bones. As one historian Riley noted, the gods seem to primarily enjoy the smell of a barbecue. So you keep your head down. You make yourself small. You master the art of being average. You tell your children not to boast, not to claim they are the best at anything, not to draw attention. You teach them the stories of the heroes not as tales of inspiration, but as cautionary fables. See what happened to Icarus when he flew too high. See what happened to Achilles when his pride overtook his sense. These are not success stories. They are warnings. The moral of every story is the same. Stay in your place. Know you are mortal, fragile, and utterly expendable. Let the past sing you to sleep, but listen closely to its melody of caution. Don't be a hero. Don't be a beauty. Don't be special, just be. And hope that is enough. The concept of divine love is perhaps the most terrifying of all. When you hear the poets sing of Zeus descending in a shower of gold to be with Danae, or Apollo relentlessly pursuing the nymph Daphne, you don't hear romance. You hear a horror story. The love of a god is not a gentle, mutual affection. It is a cosmic event, as uncontrollable and destructive as a hurricane or an earthquake. It is a desire that does not ask for consent. It is an obsession that consumes and transforms, and rarely for the better. For a mortal, being the object of a god's desire is not an honor. It is a catastrophe from which you are unlikely to emerge intact. You know the story of Semele, a princess of Thebes. She became a lover of Zeus, who visited her in secret, always in human form. It was, for a time, a thrilling and dangerous affair. But Zeus was married to Hera, the queen of the gods, whose jealousy was as legendary as her husband's infidelity. Hera, being far too clever for a direct confrontation, disguised herself as an old woman, a trusted nurse to Semele. She planted a seed of doubt in the young woman's mind. "If your lover is truly Zeus," the disguised goddess whispered, "why does he not appear to you in his true, divine form? Perhaps he is just a mortal man deceiving you." The poison of that question worked its way into Semele's heart. She needed to know. The next time Zeus was with her, filled with love and eager to please, he swore a sacred oath on the river Styx, an oath that even a god cannot break, to grant her any one wish. Her wish, fed to her by Hera's cunning, was to see him in all his divine glory. Zeus begged her to reconsider. He knew what would happen. As a mortal, her body could not withstand the raw, unfiltered power of his true form. But she insisted, and he was bound by his oath. He returned to her not as a man, but as a being of pure energy, of lightning and thunder. The moment his divinity filled the room, Semele was instantly incinerated, turned to ash by the very sight she had longed to behold. In a last-ditch effort, Zeus managed to snatch their unborn child from her womb and sew him into his own thigh to be born later. That child would become Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. But Semele, the mother, was simply gone. A victim not of divine hatred, but of divine love. Her story is a stark lesson, demanding that a god prove themselves is fatal, and their love is a fire that will consume you. And what of the women who survive such an encounter? Their lives are often ruined in other ways. Consider Io, a priestess of Hera. When Zeus desired her, he shrouded the world in a thick cloud to hide his actions from his wife. But Hera was not so easily fooled. She descended, and to protect Io, Zeus transformed her into a beautiful white cow. Hera, seeing through the ruse, feigned admiration for the animal and asked for it as a gift. Zeus, trapped, could not refuse without revealing his deception. So Hera took the cow, the woman, and tethered her, placing her under the watchful guard of Argus Panoptes, a giant with 100 eyes that never all slept at the same time. Io lived a life of misery. She was a woman trapped in an animal's form, unable to speak, forced to eat bitter grass and drink muddy water. She would try to scratch her name in the dirt with her hoof to tell her father who she was, a constant, silent scream for recognition. Eventually, Zeus sent his messenger, Hermes, to free her. Hermes lulled the 100-eyed giant to sleep with stories and music, and then killed him. But Hera's vengeance was not finished. She sent a relentless gadfly to sting the poor cow, driving her mad and forcing her to wander the known world without a moment's rest. Io's journey was one of torment, a geographical lesson in divine cruelty. She was eventually restored to her human form in Egypt, but only after unimaginable suffering. Her story is not one of a blessed union. It is one of abduction, transformation, torture, and exile. These are not isolated incidents. The myths are filled with them. Callisto, a follower of the virgin goddess Artemis, was desired and assaulted by Zeus. When her resulting pregnancy was discovered, Artemis, feeling betrayed, banished her. Hera, still not satisfied, then transformed Callisto into a bear. She lived in the woods for years, hunted and fearing hunters, until one day her own son, now a young man, came upon her, and not recognizing his mother, prepared to kill her. In a final act of what the myths call pity, Zeus intervened by placing them both in the sky as constellations. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Great and Little Bear. A beautiful story, perhaps, if you are looking at the stars, but a terrifying one if you imagine being the woman turned into an animal, forever hunted, nearly killed by your own child. Your only escape being a cold, distant eternity as a pattern of light. There's no modern equivalent to this kind of peril. There's no restraining order you can file against a god. There's no therapist to help you process the trauma of being turned into a farm animal. The very concept of love in these stories is stripped of all its modern connotations of partnership, respect, and care. It is a raw, consuming force, a statement of power. The god desires, and so the god takes. The mortal's feelings are, at best, a secondary concern and at worst, completely irrelevant. This divine love is a weapon. It destroys not only the mortal who is its object, but everyone around them. Their families are thrown into chaos. Their communities are put at risk. And the children born of these unions are often caught between two worlds, bearing a divine heritage that makes them a target for both gods and men. Think of Hercules, the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene. Hera's hatred for him was the driving force behind his entire tragic life, leading him to madness and murder. His divine blood gave him great strength, but it did not bring him peace. It brought him a lifetime of suffering. So when you see a particularly beautiful sunset, you might offer a quiet prayer of thanks to Helios. But if the god himself were to ride his chariot down from the sky and offer you the world, the wisest course of action would be to run. You don't want to be a god's lover. You don't want to be their favorite. You want them to pass you by, to find some other unfortunate soul to shower with their fatal affections. Because their love is not a gift. It is a prelude to a tragedy. Your hands are skilled at the loom. From a young age, you sat with your mother and grandmother, your small fingers learning to guide the shuttle, to pack the weft threads tightly, to create patterns that were not just functional but beautiful. It is a source of quiet pride. The blankets from your loom are warmer, the tunics softer. The patterns you weave are more intricate than your neighbors, depicting scenes from nature. A bird in flight, a running stag, the leaves of an olive tree. People in the village admire your work. They say you have a gift, but you are careful. When they praise you, you lower your eyes and murmur that you are just a humble student of Athena, the goddess of crafts and wisdom, and that any skill you possess is a pale reflection of her own divine talent. You do this because you know the story of Arachne, and it is a story that every craftsman, every artist, every mortal with a spark of talent knows by heart. Arachne was a young woman, not a princess or a nymph, but a commoner like you. She was the daughter of a dyer of wool, a man known for his brilliant purple fabrics. From this humble background, Arachne developed a skill for weaving that was not just good, it was breathtaking. Her fame spread beyond her small village. People would come from all over just to watch her work. They said it was a joy to see her, not just the finished tapestries, but the process itself. The way she would handle the raw wool, the grace with which she spun it into thread, the fluid, mesmerizing dance of her hands at the loom. Her skill was so profound, so seemingly perfect, that people began to whisper. Surely, they said, she must have been taught by Athena herself. This was the first misstep. Instead of accepting the compliment and humbly dedicating her talent to the goddess, Arachne scoffed. Taught by Athena, no, she declared. Let the goddess come and compete with her. If Arachne were to lose, she would accept any punishment. This was hubris of the highest order. It was one thing to be proud of your work. It was another thing entirely to issue a direct challenge to a powerful Olympian, especially the one who presided over the very craft you practiced. It was like a puddle challenging the ocean. The goddess Athena, of course, heard this boast, but in a moment that some scholars see as a flicker of divine patience, she did not strike Arachne down immediately. Instead, she appeared to the girl disguised as a bent and wrinkled old woman. She gently advised Arachne to be content with her fame among mortals and to yield to the goddess, asking for forgiveness for her rash words. Seek fame for your weaving among your fellow mortals, the old woman counseled, but give way to the goddess. Arachne, full of youthful arrogance, was unmoved. She mocked the old woman, telling her to save her advice for her own daughters. She repeated her challenge, her voice ringing with defiance. Let her come. I am ready. At that, the disguise fell away, and Athena stood revealed in her divine, intimidating glory. Her eyes flashed, and the other mortals in the room fell to their knees in terror. Only Arachne stood her ground, a flush of foolish pride on her face. The contest was set. 2 looms were erected, and the 2 began to weave. Athena's tapestry was a masterpiece, of course. It was also a warning. She wove a scene depicting her contest with Poseidon for the patronage of the city of Athens, a scene of her own power and victory. In the 4 corners of the tapestry, she wove smaller scenes, each one showing a mortal who had dared to challenge the gods and the terrible punishment they had received. It was a beautiful, masterful threat. The message was clear. This is who I am. This is what happens to those who defy me. Surrender now. But Arachne did not surrender. Her own tapestry was, by all accounts, just as brilliant as Athena's. The skill, the artistry, the life in her threads were flawless. But it was the subject matter that sealed her fate. Instead of weaving a tribute to the gods, or a neutral scene of nature, Arachne wove a tapestry that was a catalogue of divine scandal. She depicted, with exquisite and unflattering detail, the many deceptions and illicit affairs of the gods, particularly Zeus. She showed him tricking Europa as a bull, Danae as a shower of gold, Leda as a swan. It was a stunning piece of political satire, a mortal holding up a mirror to the hypocrisy and abuses of the Olympians. She was not just claiming to be a better weaver, she was claiming the moral high ground. She was using her art to expose and mock her superiors. When she was finished, even Athena could find no fault with the craftsmanship. The work was perfect, and this perfection combined with the sheer audacity of the subject drove the goddess into a rage. She could not accept that a mere mortal could equal her in skill and also dare to criticize her family. In a fit of fury, Athena tore Arachne's masterpiece to shreds. Then she struck the girl on the forehead with her shuttle. The blow for Arachne was not just physical. It was the sudden, crushing realization of her folly. The shame and terror of what she had done, of her impossible pride, overwhelmed her. In her despair, she tied a rope and tried to end her own life. But Athena, in a final act of what could be twistedly called mercy, would not allow her such an easy escape. As Arachne hung there, the goddess sprinkled her with a magical herb. "Live on, wicked girl," the goddess said, "but hang forever." Arachne's body began to transform. Her hair fell out, her nose and ears shrank away, and her limbs contorted and attached to her sides, becoming spindly legs. Her head fused with her body, which became a small, round abdomen. She had been turned into a spider. Her skill, the thing she was most proud of, was now her curse. She was doomed to spend eternity spinning and weaving, not beautiful tapestries, but simple, sticky webs, a constant reminder of her hubris. And from her name, we get the word arachnid. So you work at your loom and you are careful. Your art is a comfort, a part of your identity. But you never forget that it is also a potential source of danger. You make no claims to greatness. You issue no challenges. You let the praise of others wash over you without letting it soak in. You remember Arachne, and you are content to be a good weaver, not the best. You are content to be forgotten by the gods, because you know that to be noticed for your talent is to be measured, and to be measured against a god is to be found wanting, one way or another. Pride, you have learned, comes in many forms. There is the pride of skill which doomed Arachne, but there is another, perhaps more dangerous pride, the pride of a parent. You love your children. They are the center of your small world. In your eyes, they are the most beautiful, the cleverest, the strongest children in the village. This is a natural human feeling, but you are careful to keep this pride locked in your heart. You do not boast of them in the marketplace. You do not compare them favorably to your neighbor's children. And you certainly do not compare them to the children of the gods. You know that to do so is to invite a horror beyond imagining. You know the story of Niobe. Niobe was a queen, the wife of King Amphion of Thebes. She was wealthy, she was powerful, and she was, by her own account, blessed. Her greatest source of pride was her children. She had 7 sons and 7 daughters, 14 beautiful, healthy children who were the envy of all. In a world with no modern medicine, where infant mortality was terrifyingly high, having 14 children survive to adolescence was a truly remarkable feat, a fact historians often emphasize to contextualize her fortune. She saw it not just as good luck, but as a mark of her own superiority. One day, the women of Thebes were gathering to celebrate a festival in honor of Leto, the mother of the divine twins, Apollo and Artemis. They were burning incense and offering prayers to the goddess. Niobe, in her regal finery, strode into their midst. She looked upon their piety with contempt. "Why are you worshiping Leto?" she demanded. "She has only 2 children. I have 7 times that number. Look at me. My happiness is secure. I have so many children that fortune herself could not harm me. Even if a few were taken from me, I would still have more than she. Go home. Take off those laurel wreaths and stop this foolish worship. I am more worthy of a temple than she is." It was a speech of breathtaking arrogance. She not only insulted a goddess directly, but she also claimed to be immune to the whims of fate. She challenged the divine order itself. In the quiet of Olympus, Leto heard every word. Enraged by the insult, she called upon her 2 children. She pointed out Niobe's insolence, her boastful pride, and her claim to be the more fertile, more blessed mother. Apollo, the god of archery, music, and the sun, and Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt and the moon, did not need to be told twice. Their mother's honor had been challenged, and the response would be swift and terrible. From an unseen cloud high above the city of Thebes, the two gods looked down. Below, Niobe's 7 sons were in the athletic fields outside the city, practicing their horsemanship and wrestling. The first to die was Ismarus. An arrow, silent and impossibly fast, shot from Apollo's silver bow and pierced him through the heart as he was guiding his horse in a circle. He fell to the dust without a sound. One by one, his brothers followed. Another was struck as he tried to flee. A third, as he wrestled with his brother, was killed by a single arrow that passed through both of them. One begged for his life, praying to the gods, but the arrow was already loosed and could not be stopped. In a matter of minutes, all 7 sons lay dead in the field, their athletic pursuits ended by an invisible, divine wrath. News of the massacre reached the palace. King Amphion, in his grief, took his own life. Niobe, her pride now shattered into disbelief and horror, rushed to the field. She saw her 7 boys, lifeless on the ground. But even in her grief, her hubris flickered. Surrounded by the bodies, she looked to the heavens and cried out, "Cruel Leto, you have won. But even in my misery, I am still greater than you. I have lost 7, but I still have 7 more." She had not learned her lesson, and so the punishment was not complete. Her 7 daughters, who had been mourning their brothers, gathered around their mother. Suddenly, one of them shrieked and fell, an arrow from Artemis's bow buried in her back. Niobe tried to shield the others with her own body, with her robes, crying out to the heavens, "Leave me just one. The youngest one, just leave me one." But as she prayed, the last daughter fell dead at her feet. 14 children, all gone. Niobe, now utterly broken, knelt among the bodies of all her sons and daughters. Her life, her pride, her entire world had been annihilated in a single day. The grief was so immense, so all-consuming, that it literally turned her to stone. A great wind swept down and carried the weeping statue to a mountaintop in her homeland. And there she remains, a stone figure from which a stream of tears endlessly flows, a permanent monument to the catastrophic price of a mother's pride. Her people, terrified of the gods' anger, were too afraid to even bury the children. For 9 days their bodies lay unburied, until the gods themselves, their point having been made, turned them to stone and interred them. This story is a powerful piece of cultural programming. It is told to children, to mothers, to kings and queens. It reinforces the cosmic hierarchy in the starkest possible terms. Your love for your children is a beautiful human thing, but in the face of the divine, it is also a vulnerability. Your pride in them can become a weapon used against you. It is a terrifying thought, one that forces a kind of psychological self-censorship. You learn to temper your joy, to couch your praise in humility. There's no room for "my child is on the honor roll" bumper stickers in this world. There's no social media to post their smiling pictures. And in a way, that is a blessing. The anonymity you cultivate for yourself, you must also cultivate for your family. You teach your children to be strong, but not to boast of their strength. You teach them to be clever, but not to show off their cleverness. You wrap them in the same cloak of unremarkable mediocrity that protects you. You love them fiercely, but quietly. You pray that they will live long, happy, and utterly ignored lives, because you know the alternative. You have heard the story of Niobe's tears, and you have no desire to see them for yourself. There are some misfortunes you bring upon yourself through pride or foolishness. You challenge a goddess. You get turned into a spider. You boast of your children, they are taken from you. These are, in a grim way, understandable transactions. The cause and effect are clear. But there is another kind of suffering, one that is far more insidious and terrifying. It is the inherited curse, a stain that spreads through a family's bloodline like a fatal genetic disease. It is the idea that the crime of an ancestor can doom their children, and their children's children, to generations of misery, violence, and despair. You did nothing wrong. Your parents may have done nothing wrong. But 3 generations ago, a great-grandfather committed a terrible act, and the gods have a very, very long memory. Your entire life can be the payment for a debt you never incurred. There is no story that illustrates this more chillingly than the curse on the house of Atreus. It all began, as these things often do, with a mortal who thought he could outsmart the gods. His name was Tantalus. He was a king, a son of Zeus himself, and was uniquely favored. He was invited to dine with the gods on Olympus, a privilege granted to almost no other mortal. But this intimacy bred contempt. Tantalus decided to test the gods' omniscience. To see if they were truly all-knowing, he committed an act of unspeakable horror. He killed his own son, Pelops, and cooked him into a stew, which he then served to the gods at a banquet. Most of the gods, immediately recognizing the grotesque nature of the meal, recoiled in disgust. They were not fooled. But one goddess, Demeter, distracted by her grief over her missing daughter Persephone, absently ate a piece of the stew, a piece of the boy's shoulder. The gods' punishment for Tantalus was swift and eternal. They cast him into the deepest part of the underworld, a region of torment. There, he was forced to stand in a pool of water that receded every time he bent to drink, and under a fruit tree whose branches pulled away every time he reached for food. He was doomed to an eternity of tantalizing, unquenchable thirst and hunger. We get our word tantalize from his name, but the gods were not finished. They reassembled the boy Pelops, bringing him back to life. The missing shoulder piece was replaced by one of ivory, fashioned by the divine craftsman Hephaestus. Pelops was restored, but the family line was now tainted. A crime that profound, murder, cannibalism, and sacrilege all in one, could not be washed away. A curse was set in motion. Pelops grew up and had 2 sons, Atreus and Thyestes. The brothers were rivals for the throne of Mycenae. The rivalry was bitter and full of deceit. At one point, Thyestes tricked Atreus and slept with his wife, Arobe, to gain possession of a magical golden fleece that would grant him the kingship. When Atreus discovered the betrayal, his revenge was not simple murder. It was a ghastly echo of his grandfather's crime. Atreus pretended to reconcile with his brother, inviting him to a great feast. But for the main course, Atreus served Thyestes the flesh of his own sons, whom Atreus had murdered. After Thyestes had finished eating, Atreus revealed the horror of the meal, showing him the heads and hands of his children. Thyestes, in his anguish and fury, fled, but not before screaming a curse upon Atreus and all his descendants. And so the original stain, the curse from Tantalus, was renewed and deepened, passed down with even greater venom to the next generation. Atreus had two sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus. These are names you know, heroes of the Trojan War. But their heroism is steeped in the blood of their family's curse. Agamemnon became the great king of Mycenae and the leader of the Greek forces at Troy. But to even get to Troy, he had to commit a terrible act. The fleet was stalled by a lack of wind, a punishment from the goddess Artemis, whom Agamemnon had offended. To appease her, the seer Calchas declared that Agamemnon must sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia. Trapped between his ambition and his love for his child, he chose ambition. He tricked his wife, Clytemnestra, into sending their daughter to him, claiming she was to be married to the hero Achilles. But instead of a wedding, Iphigenia found a sacrificial altar. He killed his own daughter to sail for Troy. He repeated the sin of Tantalus, sacrificing his own child for his own gain. For 10 years, Agamemnon was at war, and for 10 years back in Mycenae, his wife Clytemnestra nursed a cold, burning hatred. Her grief for her daughter festered, twisted by the family curse. She took a lover, Aegisthus, the sole surviving son of Thyestes, the man whose brothers had been cooked by Agamemnon's father. Together, they plotted their revenge. When Agamemnon returned from Troy, a victorious hero, he did not find a celebration. He found a trap. Clytemnestra greeted him with false smiles and loving words. She drew him a bath, and as he stood, unarmed and vulnerable in the water, she and Aegisthus murdered him, butchering him like an animal. The king who had survived a decade of war was killed in his own home by his wife. But the cycle was not over. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra had 2 other children, a daughter named Electra and a son named Orestes. Orestes, sent away for his own safety, grew to manhood knowing that his mother had murdered his father. He was haunted by the ghost of his father and urged by the god Apollo to fulfill his duty, to avenge his father's death. But to do so, he would have to commit one of the most heinous crimes imaginable in your society, matricide, the killing of one's own mother. Torn between 2 sacred duties, avenging a father and honoring a mother, he chose vengeance. He returned to Mycenae in disguise, and he killed both his mother, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Aegisthus. The murder of his mother finally broke the cycle of blood for blood, but it came at a terrible cost. Orestes was immediately pursued by the Furies, terrifying, ancient goddesses of vengeance who hunted those guilty of killing their own kin. He was driven mad, pursued across the Greek world, until he was finally put on trial in Athens, with Athena herself presiding as judge. The jury was split, and Athena cast the deciding vote for acquittal, finally cleansing the house of Atreus of its curse. But scholars still argue about the neatness of this ending. It took divine intervention and the invention of the legal system to stop a cycle of violence that had consumed 4 generations. For you, a common person, this story is a chilling reminder of your own powerlessness. You can live the most pious, unremarkable life, but you can never know what crimes your ancestors may have committed. A shadow could be hanging over your family, just waiting for the right moment to fall. You are a part of a chain, and a single rotten link from the past can poison the entire future. It is a profound and unsettling kind of fatalism, the sense that your life is not entirely your own. It might just be the final, bloody chapter of a story someone else began. The curse of a family is a terrifying, inescapable inheritance. But there is another kind of trap, one that is more personal and in some ways more cruel. This is the trap of prophecy, of fate. It's the idea that your life's path is already written, your destination already set, and there is nothing you can do to change it. What makes this so particularly vicious is that you are often given a glimpse of this path through an oracle or a seer. You are handed a roadmap to your own destruction, and every turn you make to try and avoid the destination only leads you there more quickly. It is a cosmic joke where you are both the victim and the punchline. No story illustrates this with more tragic precision than the story of Oedipus. His story begins not with him, but with his parents, King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes. They were a royal couple, but they were childless. Desperate for an heir, Laius traveled to the oracle at Delphi, the most sacred site in your world, where the god Apollo spoke through a priestess. He asked the god if he would ever have a son. The oracle's reply was not the happy news he hoped for. It was a chilling prophecy. You will have a son, but you are fated to die by his hands, and he is fated to marry his own mother. The prophecy was so horrifying that Laius and Jocasta decided to defy it. They would not have a child. For a time they succeeded. But one night, clouded by wine and desire, they forgot their resolve. Jocasta conceived. When the baby boy was born, the parents looked at his innocent face and saw only the monster of the prophecy. They could not bring themselves to kill him directly, but they were determined to subvert fate. They took a metal pin and pierced the baby's ankles, binding them together. Then they gave the child to a shepherd and ordered him to leave the infant on a mountainside to die of exposure. They had, they believed, cut the thread of destiny. But the shepherd, a simple man, could not bring himself to leave the baby to be eaten by wild animals. He pitied the child. Instead of abandoning him, he gave the infant to another shepherd, one who grazed his flocks on the other side of the mountain, near the city of Corinth. This second shepherd, in turn, presented the baby to the childless king and queen of Corinth, Polybus and Merope. They were delighted. They adopted the boy, named him Oedipus, which means swollen foot, because of his injured ankles, and raised him as their own son and heir. They never told him he was adopted. Oedipus grew up as a prince of Corinth, beloved and respected. He had no idea of his true parentage. But one day at a banquet, a drunk nobleman, in a moment of jealousy, taunted Oedipus, calling him a bastard who was not his father's true son. The accusation lodged in Oedipus's mind like a splinter. His parents, Polybus and Merope, denied it, but their reassurances felt hollow. Doubt consumed him. Seeking the truth, Oedipus did what his real father had done before him. He traveled to the oracle at Delphi. He did not ask the oracle, "Are Polybus and Merope my real parents?" He asked a much broader question, "Who am I?" And the oracle gave him the very same prophecy it had given Laius. "You will kill your father and marry your mother." Oedipus was horrified. He loved Polybus and Merope, the only parents he had ever known. The thought of harming them was unbearable. To protect them, to escape this hideous fate, he made a decision. He would never return to Corinth. He turned his back on his home, his city, his parents, and he walked away, a voluntary exile. He believed he was running away from his destiny. In reality, he was running directly towards it. As he traveled, he came to a place where three roads met, a crossroads. At that very moment, a chariot was approaching from the other direction, carrying an older, haughty nobleman and his attendants. The man's herald ordered Oedipus to get out of the road. Oedipus, a proud prince himself, refused. An argument broke out. It escalated quickly, as arguments at crossroads in myths often do. The nobleman struck Oedipus with his staff. In a flash of rage, a rage perhaps inherited from his true, hot-tempered father, Oedipus fought back. He killed the herald, the attendants, and the old man in the chariot. He killed them all, leaving their bodies in the road. It was a violent, tragic, but not uncommon encounter. He gave it little thought and continued on his journey. He did not know, of course, that the old man he had just killed was Laius, king of Thebes, his real father. The first part of the prophecy was fulfilled. Oedipus eventually arrived at the city of Thebes. He found the city in a state of terror. Its king had recently been killed by bandits at a crossroads, and the city was being plagued by the Sphinx, a monstrous creature with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the head of a woman. The Sphinx sat outside the city gates, posing a riddle to all who tried to enter. Those who could not answer were killed and devoured. The riddle was, what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? The acting ruler of Thebes, Creon, who was Jocasta's brother, had declared that anyone who could solve the riddle and defeat the Sphinx would be made king, and would be given the widowed queen Jocasta's hand in marriage. Oedipus, clever and fearless, faced the monster. He heard the riddle and after a moment's thought gave the correct answer. Man. He crawls on all 4s as a baby, walks on 2 feet as an adult, and uses a cane in old age. The Sphinx, defeated, threw herself from her perch and died. Oedipus was hailed as a hero, the savior of Thebes. He was made the new king, and as promised, he married the queen Jocasta, his real mother. The second part of the prophecy was fulfilled. For years they ruled together and they were happy. They had 4 children. Oedipus was a good and just king. He had escaped his fate, he thought. He had built a new life. But the original crime, the killing of a king, had polluted the land. A terrible plague fell upon Thebes. The crops failed, the people died. Desperate to save his city, King Oedipus vowed to find the killer of the previous king, Laius, and to bring him to justice, no matter who he was. He launched a relentless investigation, acting as both detective and prosecutor, determined to uncover the truth. In a masterpiece of dramatic irony, the entire story becomes a man's own desperate search for himself. A search for the criminal he does not know he is. One by one, the terrible pieces of the puzzle fall into place. A messenger from Corinth arrives. A shepherd is summoned. The truth, in all its horror, is finally revealed. When Jocasta realized she had married her own son and had children with him, She went into the palace and hanged herself. Oedipus, finding her body, took the golden brooches from her dress and, in a frenzy of grief and self-loathing, stabbed his own eyes out, blinding himself. He had spent his life seeing, but he had been blind to the truth. Now he would be physically blind, but finally aware. His life is a testament to the futility of fighting fate. Every choice he made to be a good person, fleeing Corinth to protect his supposed parents, saving Thebes from the Sphinx, was another step into the trap that had been set for him before he was even born. It's a bleak thought for a sleepy mind, a story that whispers that your choices may not be choices at all, but merely the illusion of control on a path you were always meant to walk. So before this great story continues, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're enjoying our journey together. Your support means the world. You have learned to fear the gods above and the fates that pull your strings. But there is a more immediate, more tangible fear that shapes your world. It is the fear of what lies beyond the familiar circle of your village fields, beyond the reassuring sight of your neighbor's roof. Your world is small by design because the world outside of it is not empty. It is filled with things that should not be. It is a landscape teeming with monsters. These are not the misunderstood creatures of later stories. They are not simply wild animals. They are violations of the natural order, beings of profound malevolence and terrifying power. The poet Hesiod called them a race of monsters, terrible and great. And for you, that is not poetry. It is a practical travel advisory. Every journey, no matter how short, is a gamble. The woods are not just woods. They are a place where you might meet a centaur. And while a few, like Chiron, were wise tutors, most were wild, violent creatures, prone to drunken rampages. The sea is not just water. It is the domain of Scylla, a creature with 6 dog heads on long necks, who plucks sailors from the decks of their ships, and Charybdis, a living whirlpool that swallows the sea and everything in it 3 times a day. So, before we continue this part of our story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're enjoying our journey together. Your support means the world and helps us keep exploring these sleepy, strange corners of history. Imagine you need to travel to the next town, perhaps a day's walk away, to sell your surplus olives at a larger market. There is no paved road, no highway one. There is a dirt track, barely wide enough for a cart, that winds through hills and patches of forest. You do not travel alone if you can help it. You wait until a small group is heading in the same direction. There is safety in numbers, or at least the illusion of it. As you walk, the familiar landscape of your village gives way to something wilder. The trees are thicker here, the shadows deeper. You hear a sound, a snap of a twig in the undergrowth. Is it a deer? Or is it something else? You've heard the stories. Stories of satyrs, half man and half goat, who are not the playful flute players of pastoral poems, but dangerous, lustful beings who might ambush a traveler. You clutch the simple wooden staff in your hand a little tighter. It feels like a flimsy defense. You come to a river that you must cross. There is no bridge. You must find a shallow place to ford it. As you wade into the cool water, you can't help but think of the Lernaean Hydra, the 9-headed serpent slain by Hercules. You know it was killed, but the story serves as a reminder of what the waters can hold. Every ripple, every dark shape beneath the surface, sparks a flicker of primal fear. The simple act of crossing a stream is fraught with a tension that a modern person, accustomed to steel and concrete bridges, could scarcely imagine. The mountains are the worst. They are the homes of the most formidable creatures. You look up at the distant, rocky peaks, and you know that somewhere up there are the lairs of griffins, creatures with the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle, who guard vast treasures and will tear any intruder to pieces. And what of the Gorgons, the three sisters with snakes for hair? The most famous, Medusa, was slain by Perseus, but the myth implies her two sisters were immortal. Are they still out there somewhere in some desolate, rocky corner of the world, their gaze capable of turning a living being to stone? Historians suggest that these monster stories may have been personifications of natural dangers. A rockslide becomes a cyclops, a dangerous strait becomes Scylla and Charybdis. But for you, the distinction is meaningless. The danger is real, whatever its name. There's a quirky tidbit of lore here. Not all monsters were solitary. Take the Grey sisters. They were three old women who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them, passing them back and forth. They were not necessarily aggressive, but they held ancient knowledge, and dealing with them was a terrifying prospect. They represent a different kind of monstrousness, not physical threat, but unnatural existence, a creepy, unsettling wrongness that lives in the periphery of your world. These creatures define the boundaries of your existence. They are the reason you do not explore. They are the reason that when a ship is lost at sea, you assume it was a monster, not a storm. They are the embodiment of the chaos that lurks just outside the small circle of order you have built. Your village is not just a place to live. It is a fortress, a tiny island of perceived safety in a sea of monstrosity. And what happens when these monsters encroach on your world? You don't have an army or a police force to call. Your village might have a few men who are decent with a spear from hunting boar, but that is no match for a creature of myth. When the Sphinx sat outside of Thebes, the city was paralyzed. It couldn't be defeated by a militia. It required a hero, a special individual with the wits or strength to face the unnatural. This creates a strange dependence. You fear the wilderness, and you need a specialist to deal with its threats. But this brings its own set of problems, because the arrival of a hero in your town is often just a different kind of disaster. The monsters are a constant, ambient threat, a reason to stay home. They are the terrifying, here be dragons on the map of your life. They make the world feel unpredictable and hostile, reinforcing the central lesson of your existence. The world is not safe, and your best chance of survival is to stay within the small, known territory of your home, your field, and your village. Do not wander. Do not stray from the path, because the path is all that separates you from the things that live in the shadows, waiting. When a monster plagues the land, a sphinx strangling travelers, a wild boar the size of a bull ravaging the countryside, you pray for a hero. And when one finally arrives, his shoulders broad and a famous weapon in his hand, there is a great sense of relief. At last, someone has come to solve the problem. But this relief is quickly followed by a deep sense of anxiety, because you know that heroes are not neat and tidy solutions. They are forces of nature in their own right, walking calamities who often cause as much destruction as the monsters they fight. Having a hero in your town is like inviting a thunderstorm into your house to put out a candle. It might solve the immediate problem, but the collateral damage can be immense. This is the disposable hero problem. Take the most famous hero of all, Hercules. His life was one long, violent road trip. When he came to your region, it was usually because he was in the middle of one of his 12 labors, a series of seemingly impossible tasks given to him as penance for killing his own family in a fit of madness sent by the goddess Hera. So from the outset, you're dealing with an individual of immense power, incredible strength, and a background of extreme trauma and divine persecution. He is not a stable presence. Let's say Hercules comes to your town to deal with the Stymphalian birds, monstrous birds with beaks of bronze and metallic feathers they could launch like arrows. They've been nesting in a nearby marsh, killing livestock and making it impossible to work the fields. You need them gone. Hercules arrives, but his methods are not subtle. He doesn't set traps. He might, as the myth says, use a great rattle to frighten the birds into the air and then shoot them down with his hydra-poisoned arrows. The good news: the bird problem is solved. The bad news: your region is now littered with the carcasses of giant, bronze-feathered birds, and more importantly, with arrows dipped in the most lethal poison known to existence. The Hydra's blood was so toxic that even its scent was fatal. What if a curious child finds one of these arrows? What if the poison leaches into the water table of the very marsh the birds were nesting in? Hercules doesn't stick around for the cleanup. His labor is done. He moves on to the next one, leaving you to deal with the hazardous waste of his heroism. His solution is effective, but dangerously messy. Or consider another kind of hero, like Jason, the leader of the Argonauts. He came to Colchis on his quest for the Golden Fleece. To the king of Colchis, Aedes, Jason was not a hero. He was a foreign adventurer demanding a sacred national treasure. To win the fleece, Jason had to perform a series of tasks, one of which was to plow a field using 2 fire-breathing bulls. He accomplished this with the help of the king's daughter, the sorceress Medea, who had fallen in love with him. So Jason gets his fleece. He is the hero of his own story. But from the perspective of a common person in Colchis, what happened? A foreigner arrived, seduced the princess, and stole the kingdom's most prized magical artifact. In the process, Medea, to help Jason escape, murdered her own brother and scattered his body parts in the sea to slow down her father's pursuit. The arrival of the hero Jason brought betrayal, murder, and sacrilege to Colchis. Their kingdom was left shamed, grieving, and without its symbol of divine favor. Jason's heroic quest was their national tragedy. The very nature of a hero's quest makes them dangerous to ordinary people. Their lives are epic, and epics are messy. They are driven by grand destinies, divine commands, or epic quests for glory. Your desire for a quiet, predictable life is not on their agenda. When Achilles and Agamemnon argue over a captured woman, the entire Greek army grinds to a halt. The pride of 2 great heroes puts thousands of common soldiers at risk. When Odysseus returns to Ithaca, he doesn't just reclaim his throne. He slaughters, in a horrifically violent scene, all of the suitors who had taken over his house. From his perspective, it's justice. From the perspective of the mothers and fathers of those young noblemen, it's a massacre. Their sons, however arrogant and ill-behaved, were wiped out by a single man's rage. There's a fundamental disconnect between your world and theirs. Heroes operate on a different moral plane. They converse with gods, fight monsters, and are driven by passions that are larger than life. They are not concerned with the harvest, the mending of a roof, or the price of olive oil. They are a disruptive technology. They arrive, upend the local order, defeat a great evil, and in the process, often introduce a new kind of chaos. Historians sometimes frame these hero myths as charter myths, stories that explain the founding of cities or the establishment of new dynasties. But at the ground level, that process of founding and establishing is often incredibly violent and destructive for the people already living there. You come to see heroes not as saviors to be emulated, but as dangerous phenomena to be survived, like a flood or a plague. Their presence is a sign that something is terribly wrong. If your town needs a hero, it means your problems have escalated beyond all normal human scale. You are grateful when they succeed, but you are even more grateful when they leave. You sweep up the pieces, bury the dead, and pray that your village can go back to being boring and insignificant, that it will never again be noteworthy enough to require another heroic intervention. The hero is, in essence, disposable. He is a tool to be used for a specific, monstrous problem. And once the problem is solved, you want the tool put away, far away, before it breaks something else. You admire their courage from a great distance, through the words of a poet, but you never, ever want to meet one in person. After a life of carefully avoiding the wrath of gods, the pride of heroes, and the teeth of monsters, it finally comes to an end. Perhaps it is a fever, a swift and sudden sickness that no herbal remedy can touch. Perhaps it is the simple, slow decline of old age, your body wearing out like an old tunic. Or perhaps, despite all your precautions, you are simply unlucky, a stray arrow in a skirmish, a fall from a ladder, a shipwreck. However it happens, your spirit, your psyche, separates from your body. But this is not a moment of glorious ascent to a heavenly paradise. What awaits you is not a reward, but a final, soul-crushing bureaucracy. The journey to the underworld and the existence within it is perhaps the ultimate argument for why it sucked to be immortal. Your shade, a fluttering, witless echo of your former self, now stands on the banks of a dark, greasy river. This is the river Styx, the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The air is cold and smells of decay and damp earth. The only sound is the mournful lapping of the water and the faint, whispery gibbering of countless other shades waiting with you. There is a ferryman, a grim, ancient figure named Charon. His job is to carry the souls of the newly dead across the river, but he does not work for free. This is your first bureaucratic hurdle. To pay for passage, you must have a coin, an obol, placed in your mouth when you were buried. This is why burial rites are so critically important. Your family's final duty to you is to ensure you have the fare. If they failed, if your body was lost at sea, or if they were too poor or too negligent to provide the coin, then you are out of luck. You are doomed to wander the banks of the Styx for 100 years, a lost, pathetic ghost, until you are finally allowed to cross. You can see the ferry, you can see the other side, but you are barred by a simple, transactional rule. There's no appeal, no one to argue your case. It is a system of pure, indifferent procedure. Assuming your family did their duty, you present your coin to Karen. He allows you onto his skiff. The crossing is silent and bleak. On the other side, the shore is guarded by Cerberus, a monstrous three-headed dog with a mane of snakes. He is a terrifying sight, but his job is not to keep you out. It is to keep you in. Cerberus fawns on new arrivals, but he will savagely devour any soul who tries to escape back to the world of the living. The message is clear. There is no going back. This is final. Now you enter the realm of Hades proper. It is not a place of fire and brimstone, not a place of active, fiery torment for most. It is something arguably worse, a place of endless, gray, tedious monotony. You are led before a tribunal of 3 judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. These were once mortal kings, famed for their wisdom and justice. Now, they are the administrators of the dead. They review your life. But this is not a judgment of your moral character in the way a modern person might think of it. They are not concerned if you were kind or compassionate. Their criteria are more specific. Did you show proper piety to the gods? Did you honor your parents? Did you respect the laws of hospitality? Were you guilty of hubris or, worst of all, of killing your own kin? For the vast majority of people like you, who have lived unremarkable lives, the verdict is neutral. You were not a great hero, but you were not a great sinner either. You were just a person, and your destination reflects that. You are not sent to the Elysian fields, a sunny paradise reserved for the most heroic and demigods. Nor are you sent to Tartarus, the deep pit of eternal punishment for those who committed truly heinous crimes like Tantalus or Sisyphus. You are sent to the Asphodel Meadows. The Asphodel Meadows are the final home for the overwhelming majority of mortal souls, and it is crushingly bleak. Imagine an endless gray field, perpetually shrouded in twilight. The ground is covered with pale, ghostly, scentless flowers, asphodel. Here, your shade wanders for eternity, with no memory of your former life, no personality, no joy, no sorrow. You are a mere whisper of your former self, squeaking and fluttering like a bat. You might encounter the shades of others you knew in life, but you will not recognize them. You perform the same tasks you did in life, but as a mindless pantomime. The shade of a farmer pushes a phantom plow. The shade of a weaver moves a phantom shuttle. It is an eternity of empty, pointless repetition. When the hero Odysseus traveled to the underworld and spoke to the shade of the great Achilles, he tried to comfort him, telling him he was a great king even among the dead. Achilles' response is one of the most chilling lines in all of Greek literature. The shade of the greatest warrior who ever lived replied, "Do not speak to me of death, glorious Odysseus. I would rather be a servant, a hired hand to a poor, landless farmer, than be the king of all these lifeless dead." He would rather be the lowest of the low in the living world, to feel the sun and the dirt, than to rule in this kingdom of nothingness. This view of the afterlife profoundly shaped the mortal experience. Your life, this single, brief existence, was all you had. There was no promise of a better world to come that made the sufferings of this one worthwhile. Your reward for a life of toil and fear was not heaven, but an eternity of gray, mindless boredom. This made life itself incredibly precious, but also unbearably tragic. Every moment was fleeting, and the end was not a release, but a fading into insignificance. This is why glory for heroes was so important. A great name, a story that would be told for generations, was the only form of immortality a mortal could hope for. But for you, the average person, there would be no story. There would only be the ferryman, the three-headed dog, and the endless, silent fields of asphodel. It's a profoundly boring Greek myth for sleep, a descent into a quiet, gray nothingness. In your world, there is no phone to call for help, no police force to investigate a crime, no universally accessible court system to appeal to. The very concept of justice is a slippery, dangerous thing. If you are wronged, your options are limited and often perilous. Justice, as you know it, is not a blindfolded woman holding a set of balanced scales. It is a messy, personal, and often violent affair, dispensed not by a system but by the powerful, the vengeful, or the divine. For the average person, this means that true justice is a luxury you likely cannot afford. Imagine your neighbor's ox, driven by a moment of stubbornness, breaks through the flimsy fence separating your small plots of land and tramples a significant portion of your lentil crop. This is a disaster. That crop was meant to feed your family for months. You are now facing a genuine hardship. What do? There is no small claims court. You cannot sue your neighbor. Your first course of action is personal negotiation. You go to your neighbor, point out the damage, and ask for compensation. Perhaps he is a reasonable man, and fearing a feud, he agrees to give you a portion of his own harvest or help you repair the fence. This is the ideal outcome, a resolution based on community pressure and the shared desire to live in peace. But what if he refuses? What if he claims his ox was provoked, or that your fence was too weak? What if he is simply more powerful than you, physically stronger, with more sons or more influential relatives in the village? Now you are in a difficult position. You can let the injustice stand, swallowing your anger and your loss. This is often the wisest, though most bitter, choice. It avoids further conflict, or you can escalate the feud. This could involve a series of retaliatory actions, a coincidental injury to one of his goats, a rumor spread about his wife in the market. This path is incredibly dangerous. A simple dispute over lentils can quickly spiral into a multi-generational blood feud, a miniature version of the curse on the house of Atreus, poisoning the peace of the entire village. If the matter is more serious, a theft, an assault, a murder, the situation is even more dire. Your village might have a council of elders, respected men who can arbitrate disputes. You can bring your case before them, but they are not impartial judges in a modern sense. They are your neighbors. Their decisions will be influenced by kinship, by old friendships, by existing rivalries, and by who is the more powerful party in the dispute. Historians note that in many early Greek legal systems, the goal was less about determining absolute truth and more about finding a resolution that would restore community balance and prevent a feud from erupting. This might mean a compromise that feels unjust to you, but serves the greater good of the village. Justice for the individual is secondary to the stability of the collective. Your other option for justice is a divine one. You can appeal to the gods. You can go to the altar of Zeus, the protector of oaths and justice, and offer a sacrifice, praying for him to punish the person who wronged you. This is a long shot. The gods, as you know, have their own concerns and are not a reliable customer service line. Another, darker option is the curse tablet. You could pay a specialist, a type of magician, to write your curse on a thin sheet of lead. You would describe the wrong done to you and call upon the gods of the underworld, like Hermes or Hecate, to inflict a terrible punishment on your enemy. Archaeologists have found hundreds of these tablets, buried near graves or thrown into sacred springs. They are a fascinating, visceral record of personal anger and a desperate grasp for justice. A common person, powerless to act directly, would use this secret, magical means to seek retribution. "I bind the tongue of my opponent," one might read, "so that he may not speak against me in the assembly." This absence of a reliable, impartial legal system creates a world of constant vulnerability. Your rights are only as strong as your ability to personally defend them. This is why family and kinship are everything. Your brothers, your cousins, your father, they are your legal team and your bodyguards. An insult to you is an insult to them all, and an attacker knows they will face the wrath of your entire clan. This is also why hospitality, the custom of welcoming strangers, is a sacred duty protected by Zeus himself. A traveler is alone, without their kin to protect them. The laws of hospitality are a social contract that provides a fragile shield for the vulnerable. To harm a guest under your roof is one of the greatest sins, inviting direct divine retribution, because there is no other system to protect them. You live in a state of legal precarity. A powerful man can seize your land and you have little recourse. A nobleman can insult you and you must swallow your pride. Your only protection is the fear of reprisal, either from your family or from the gods. This makes the world feel profoundly unfair. There is no equality under the law because there is very little law to be equal under. The scales of justice are permanently tilted in favor of the strong, the wealthy, and the well-connected. So you learn to be cautious. You avoid disputes whenever possible. You choose your words carefully. You rely on the strength of your family and the respect of your community. You try to live in such a way that you never need to seek justice, because the process of seeking it is so often a path to further ruin. Your greatest hope is to live a life so peaceful and uncontroversial that you never have to test the flimsy boundaries of mortal law or call upon the terrifying, unpredictable judgment of the divine. You simply hope that your neighbor keeps his ox on his own land. Your home is a single room of mud brick and timber, with a packed earth floor and a small hole in the thatched roof to let out the smoke from the hearth. It is not much, but it is everything to you. It is your sanctuary, the one place in this hostile world where you should feel safe. It is the repository of your few possessions, a couple of clay pots, your sleeping mats, a wooden chest holding the heavy wool blanket your grandmother wove. This space, however humble, represents the fragile bubble of order you have created for yourself and your family. But you know, in the quiet moments of the night, that the walls are thin, and the safety they provide is a comforting illusion. Your home, your hearth, is perpetually vulnerable. The most constant threat is a human one. There are no locks on your door. A simple wooden bar that you slide into place is all that secures you from the outside world. In times of peace, the social pressure of village life is your best security system. Everyone knows everyone, and a thief would be quickly identified and ostracized, or worse. But this security is fragile. A famine, a drought, or the chaos of a nearby war can fray the bonds of community. Desperate people do desperate things. A stranger on the road is a source of suspicion. A traveler asking for shelter for the night is a risk. You are bound by the sacred laws of hospitality to take them in, but as you share your gritty bread with them, you watch them. You assess the threat. Is their story true? Are they simply a traveler, or are they a bandit, a fugitive, an exile? Your home is a fortress with a permanently open gate. Then there is the threat from nature, which in your world is never just nature. It is always an expression of divine will. A storm that rips the thatch from your roof is not just bad weather. It is a sign of Poseidon's anger or Zeus's displeasure. A wildfire that sweeps down from the hills, threatening your wooden home and your small olive grove, is a manifestation of a god's fury. You don't have insurance. You can't call the fire department. You can only pray and try to fight the blaze with buckets of water, a futile gesture against a divine rage. When you lose your home to a natural disaster, you have lost everything. There is no government agency to provide aid, no disaster relief fund. You are at the mercy of your neighbor's charity. But the most insidious threat to your home comes from the gods themselves, for whom your walls are no obstacle at all. The myths are filled with stories of gods entering mortal homes, often with disastrous consequences. Zeus was a master of the home invasion, appearing in bedrooms as a shower of gold, a swan, or a cloud of mist. Remember when he visited Semele in her chambers, and the encounter ended with her being burned to a cinder. Her royal bedroom became her funeral pyre. Your home is not a private space to a god. It is just another part of the mortal stage on which they play out their dramas. Imagine you are Alcmene, the wife of the hero Amphitryon. Your husband is away at war. One night he returns, or so you think. He looks like your husband, he sounds like your husband. It is Zeus in disguise who has come to seduce you. He even magically makes the night 3 times longer so he can have more time with you. The next day, the real Amphitryon returns, victorious from battle, only to be confused by your less than enthusiastic welcome. But you just came home last night, you might say, and the terrible divine deception is revealed. Your home, your marriage bed, has been violated by the king of the gods himself. The son you bear from this encounter will be Hercules, a demigod who will be hated by Hera for his entire life. A single, divine intrusion has sown chaos and danger into the very heart of your family. Even the architecture of your home reflects this vulnerability. Historians speculate that the typical design of a more prosperous Greek house, with its rooms arranged around a central courtyard, and a strict division between the public male quarters and the private female quarters, was partly a response to this constant social and divine threat. It was an attempt to create a defensible, private space, to put as many walls and doors as possible between the women of the house and the dangerous outside world. But these were defenses of culture, not of physics. They could not stop a determined intruder, and they certainly could not stop a god. The fragility of your home highlights the fragility of your life. There is no true sanctuary. There is no place you can go where you are completely safe from the interference of others, the whims of nature, or the terrifying intrusions of the divine. This constant, low-level precarity shapes your worldview. You learn not to get too attached to possessions, as they can be easily lost, stolen, or destroyed. You learn that the walls of your house are merely a suggestion of privacy, not a guarantee. The home is not a castle, but a temporary shelter. You find comfort not in the physical structure, but in the rituals that bind it together. The hearth is the sacred center of the home, dedicated to the goddess Hestia. Every day, you tend the fire. Every meal, you offer a small portion to her. These rituals are an attempt to impose a sense of order and sanctity on a vulnerable space. You are asking the goddess to protect your home, to make it a place of peace and stability. You treat your home not as a possession, but as a sacred trust that must be constantly maintained and defended through both physical vigilance and pious acts. It is a never-ending effort to keep the chaos of the outside world at bay, knowing that it is always pressing to get in. Living in this world, you are steeped in a kind of perpetual low-grade fear. It is not the acute, heart-pounding terror of a single, dramatic event, but a constant, grinding anxiety that becomes the background noise of your life. It is a psychological burden, an emotional weight that shapes your thoughts, your decisions, and your very personality. You are a pawn in a cosmic game you cannot comprehend, on a board populated by angry gods, hungry monsters, and reckless heroes. The mental toll of this powerlessness is immense. Your emotional landscape is fundamentally different from a modern one. You do not have the luxury of believing you are in control of your own life. The concept of manifesting your destiny or being the architect of your own future would be laughable to you. It would be a form of hubris, an invitation for disaster. Instead, your worldview is grounded in a deep and abiding fatalism. Your fate, your mora, was spun for you at birth by three ancient goddesses, the fates themselves. One spun the thread of your life, another measured it, and the third, Atropos, cut it with her shears. Not even Zeus could overrule their decisions. This belief system, while grim, is also a coping mechanism. When tragedy strikes, a child dies of fever, a storm destroys your olive grove, it is devastating. But the framework of fate provides a way to understand it. It was not a random, meaningless event. It was meant to be. This doesn't make the pain go away, but it contains it. It prevents you from falling into a spiral of what-ifs. What if I had used a different herb? What if I had harvested a day earlier? Such questions are pointless if the outcome was already written. This fatalism is a shield against the madness of a chaotic world, but it is a heavy shield to carry. It fosters a sense of resignation, a belief that your struggles are ultimately futile against the grand design of the cosmos. Fear governs your social interactions. You are cautious with your words. A boast can attract divine jealousy. A careless oath can bind you to a disastrous course of action. A rumor can destroy a reputation and lead to a violent feud. You learn to speak in careful, measured tones, to master the art of saying nothing of consequence. This is not a culture that rewards radical honesty or outspokenness. It rewards discretion, humility, and the ability to keep your head down. This constant self-censorship, this fear of misspeaking, creates a tension in all your relationships. You can never be completely sure of anyone's true thoughts or feelings, because everyone is playing the same cautious game. The ever-present threat of divine interference instills a specific kind of paranoia. Is that sudden gust of wind just the wind, or is it a message from a god? Is that stranger who is a little too handsome or a little too beautiful just a person? Or is it Apollo or Aphrodite in disguise, looking for someone to love, and therefore ruin? You learn to look for omens in everything. The flight of birds, the shape of a cloud, the contents of an animal's entrails during a sacrifice. These are not superstitions. They are your equivalent of a weather forecast, a desperate attempt to read the intentions of the powerful, invisible forces that control your life. This constant scanning for signs and portents is mentally exhausting. It means you can never fully relax. You are always interpreting, always worrying, always trying to guess the mood of the universe. There is no such thing as a simple coincidence. Every event is potentially meaningful, a clue in a cosmic puzzle you must solve to survive. Some scholars call this a paranoid style of thinking, a necessary adaptation to a world where divine beings were believed to actively and constantly intervene in human affairs. This psychology also affects your capacity for joy. When good things happen, a bountiful harvest, the birth of a healthy child, your happiness is always tempered by fear. You know how quickly good fortune can be taken away. You feel a surge of pride in your beautiful child, and then you remember Niobe. You feel a moment of satisfaction in your well-tended field, and then you remember that Demeter could take it all away on a whim. This prevents you from fully savoring your successes. Every moment of happiness is shadowed by the knowledge of its own fragility. You learn to embrace a kind of cautious, muted contentment rather than exuberant joy, because exuberant joy is a beacon that attracts the attention of the gods. And yet, despite this crushing psychological weight, you endure. This is the great paradox of your existence. You live in a state of constant fear, but you are not paralyzed by it. You still get up every morning. You still tend your crops, raise your children, and share stories with your neighbors around the hearth. Human resilience is a powerful force. You find meaning and comfort not in grand cosmic schemes, but in the small, tangible realities of your life. The warmth of the fire, the taste of bread, the familiar face of your child, the rhythm of the seasons. You develop a dark, ironic sense of humor to cope with the absurdity of it all. You create rituals and traditions that give you a sense of agency, however small. You build strong communities because you know you cannot survive alone. The psychological toll is real. It leaves a permanent mark on your soul. It makes you cautious, fatalistic, and weary. But it does not break you. It forges you into something incredibly tough, adaptable, and pragmatic. You are a survivor in the truest sense of the word, navigating a universe designed to crush you and finding a way against all odds to live. In a world filled with such uncertainty, it is only natural to seek guidance. You crave knowledge of the future, a glimpse of the path ahead, so that you might make the right choices and avoid disaster. Your culture provides a way to do this. You can consult an oracle, a priest or priestess who is believed to channel the words of a god. You can hire a seer to interpret the omens. But this is one of the cruelest tricks the cosmos plays on you. Seeking clarity almost always leads to greater confusion and ruin. The treachery of oracles and omens is a central theme in your life, another reason why it is so difficult to be immortal. The truth, when it comes from the gods, is a weapon. The most famous and respected source of prophecy is the Oracle of Delphi, where the priestess, known as the Pythia, speaks the words of Apollo. Kings and commoners alike make the long, difficult pilgrimage to her temple on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. They bring rich gifts and offerings, hoping to receive a clear answer to their desperate questions. What they receive instead is often a riddle, a poetic but ambiguous phrase that is dangerously open to misinterpretation. Apollo, through his priestess, does not lie, but he tells the truth in a way that is designed to mislead. Consider the story of Croesus, the fantastically wealthy king of Lydia. He was contemplating a war against the rising power of Persia. Before launching his attack, he did his due diligence. He sent messengers to Delphi to ask the oracle a simple question: should I wage war on Persia? The Pythia's response became one of the most famous oracular statements in history. If Croesus crosses the Halys River, a great empire will be destroyed. Croesus was overjoyed. He interpreted the prophecy as a clear sign of his impending victory. A great empire would be destroyed. Obviously, the Persian won. Bolstered by this divine assurance, he gathered his armies, crossed the Halys River, and engaged the forces of the Persian king, Cyrus the Great. The war was a complete disaster. The Lydian army was crushed, Croesus was captured, and his capital city was sacked. His great empire was utterly destroyed. As he was Section 14 about to be executed, he finally understood the oracle's cruel trick. A great empire had been destroyed, just as Apollo in a world filled with so much uncertainty, where the gods are silent and fate had promised. But it was his own. The prophecy was perfectly true, but his own ambition and wishful thinking had led is a closed book. It is only natural to seek a glimpse of the future. You crave guidance. You want to know him to interpret it in the way he wanted to hear. He had paid a fortune for a piece of advice that led if you should plant your fields early this year, if your sick child will recover, if your son will return safely from his directly to his ruin. This is the fundamental problem with oracles. The answers they provide are not straightforward guidance. They are journey, and there are ways to ask. The world is full of omens for those who know how to read them and tests of wisdom, and it is a test that mortals, blinded by their own hopes and fears, almost always fail. More importantly, there are oracles, places where the gods speak directly to mortals. But seeking this knowledge is a dangerous game. The ambiguity of the prophecy acts as a mirror, reflecting your own desires back at you. You hear what you want, a guidance you receive is often cryptic, misleading, or a direct path to the very ruin you are trying to avoid. The tree here. The same danger exists on a smaller, more personal scale. You might see a flight of eagles and runishary of oracles is one of the cruelest jokes the gods play on humanity. The most famous and respected oracle is at to a local seer to ask what it means. The seer, a man or woman who claims to understand the language of the birds Delphi, sacred to Apollo. Here, a priestess known as the Pythia sits on a tripod over a fissure in the earth, might tell you it is a favorable omen for a business venture. But perhaps the eagles were a sign of a coming battle and breathing in sacred vapors. In her divinely inspired trance, she speaks the words of the god. But Apollo does not speak in the venture you should be embarking on is reinforcing your village walls. A dream of a snake might be interpreted as a clear, simple sentences. His prophecies are notoriously ambiguous, riddles wrapped in enigmas. The interpretation is left to you, sign of healing, as snakes were associated with the god of medicine, Asclepius. Or it might be a warning, and it is in that interpretation that the trap is often sprung. Consider the story of Croesus, the fab of treachery and deceit. The omen itself is neutral. The interpretation is everything. An interpretation is a human, fallible, arduously wealthy king of Lydia. He was considering a war against the rising power of Persia. Before launching his attack, he did his due diligence. He sent messengers to Delphi to ask the oracle a simple question. Should I attack Persia, the pie? This is a world without science, without a clear understanding of cause and effect. Omens and oracles are Eorthia's reply has become legendary. If you cross the river, a great empire will be destroyed. Crow attempt to find patterns in the chaos, but because the system is so unreliable, it often creates more anxiety than it relieves. Essus was overjoyed. He interpreted the prophecy as a clear sign of his impending victory. He saw himself as the destroyer of the great. You receive a prophecy that your son will die at sea. Do you forbid him from ever becoming a sailor? If you do, perhaps Persian Empire. Filled with confidence, he gathered his armies, crossed the Halys River, and engaged the forces of Cyrus the Great. He becomes a farmer instead, and is one day killed by a bull that has the sea god Poseidon's image. He was utterly defeated. His army was crushed, his capital city was sacked, and he was captured. The Great branded on it. The attempt to sidestep the prophecy fulfills it in an ironic, unexpected way, just like with Oedipus. Empire that was destroyed was his own. The oracle was not wrong. It was perfectly, literally true. But there's a quirky historical fact about the Pythia at Delphi. For centuries, people believed she was intoxicated by volcanic, also completely misleading. It played on his own ambition and arrogance, allowing him to hear what he wanted to hear. His gases or fumes that seeped from a chasm in the rock beneath her tripod seat. For a long time, modern scholars dismissed this quest for certainty, led him directly to his downfall. This is the classic trick of the oracle. The prophecies are almost always true, but their meaning is only clear in hindsight, after the tragedy has already occurred. Remember Oedipus, as no such chasm could be found. However, more recent geological surveys have discovered intersecting fault lines right under the temple ruins that could have released intoxicating gases like ethylene, a sweet-smelling gas that can produce a trance-like state. The oracle told him he would kill his father and marry his mother. It did not tell him that the people he thought it's a fascinating case where an ancient story, once dismissed as myth, might have a real, scientific basis, where his parents were not his real parents. Every piece of information the oracle provides is a perfectly shaped key, but for you, the source of her vision is irrelevant. What matters is that her words, whether from a god or from never told which lock it opens, you are left to fumble in the dark, and more often than not, you unlock the door to your own doom. Beyond the grand oracles like Delphi, your daily life is filled with smaller gas, have the power to destroy you. This treachery of prophecy reinforces the core theme of mortal powerlessness. Even when you are given a glimpse behind the curtain of fate, the knowledge is useless. It is a poisoned gift, a more personal form of divination. You look for omens everywhere. A flight of eagles to the right might be a good sign, tempting you to act, to try and control your destiny. But every action you take based on that partial cryptic, while a flight of vultures to the left is a terrible one. A sneeze at a critical moment could be a sign of divine approval. A dream could be a message from the gods, or it could be a meaningless trick sent by a minor. Knowledge only tightens the knot of your fate. You learn a hard lesson. The wise person is not the one who seeks spirit. This creates a constant need for interpretation. There are seers and soothsayers in your village, specialists to know the future. The wise person is the one who accepts their ignorance. They understand that the future is the domain of the gods who can read these signs for you for a small price. But how much do you trust them? And the fates, and it is not for mortals to meddle with. You learn to live your life in the present, their interpretation genuine? Or are they, like the oracle, just telling you what they think you want to hear? Or what? To make the best decisions you can with the limited knowledge you have. You focus on your duties, your family, your serves their own interests. This reliance on omens can lead to a kind of paralysis. You are about to set a small patch of earth. You let the future unfold as it will. You stop asking questions because you know that in this out on a journey, but you see a raven croaking on your roof. Is it a bad omen? Should you postpone the world? The answers are often more dangerous than the uncertainty they replace. The greatest wisdom is to stop seeking signs, too. You wait a day. The next morning, everything seems fine, but then you stumble on your own doorstep. Another let the birds fly where they may, and not ask the gods for a map of a road you are forced to travel anyway. And so, you arrive at the final, overarching lesson of your mortal life, the one great truth that all these stories, all these fears, and all these struggles point to. It is the wisdom of being forgotten. In the grand, tragic opera of Greek mythology, you are not a soloist. You are not even in the chorus. Your greatest hope, your most fervent prayer, is to be a member of the audience. sitting so far in the back that none of the actors on stage can even see you. Glory, fame, beauty, exceptional talent, these are not aspirations. They are liabilities. The greatest blessing the gods can give you is to never know your name. Think back on the journey. Divine attention, you have learned, is a curse. To be noticed by a god, whether for your beauty like Io, your piety like Semele, or your pride like Niobe, is to have your life hijacked and turned into a cautionary tale. Their love is consuming, their anger is annihilating, and even their help is transformative in the most terrifying ways. You do not want their attention. You want their indifference. You want to be a tiny, insignificant speck on the vast canvas of the world, too small for their divine eyes to even register. Hubris, the sin of excessive pride, is the surest way to get noticed. Arachne's perfect weaving was not her crime. Her crime was boasting that it was better than a goddess's. Her pride was a challenge, an invitation to a contest she could never win. You have learned to internalize the opposite of hubris, a deep, profound, and strategic humility. You temper your joy, you downplay your successes, you praise the gods for any small talent you possess. It is a constant performance of mediocrity, a conscious effort to make yourself seem less than you are, because to seem like too much is to be a target. You have seen how curses and prophecies are inescapable traps. The house of Atreus was doomed by the sins of an ancestor, a debt of blood that could only be paid in more blood. Oedipus was doomed by a prophecy he tried his entire life to outrun. These stories teach you that you are not in control. Your life is subject to forces far beyond your understanding, the grudges of the past and the designs of the future. To struggle against these forces is to become entangled in them. The only path to a semblance of peace is to accept your limited agency, to focus on the small, manageable sphere of your own actions, and not to tempt fate by trying to understand or defy it. The world is filled with monsters, and the heroes who fight them are just as dangerous. The presence of either is a sign of chaos, a disruption to the fragile order of your life. You do not long for adventure. You do not wish to see a hero in action. You wish for boring, uneventful days. You wish for the path to the next village to be free of both griffins and glory-seeking demigods. The greatest adventure you can hope for is a long life that is never interesting enough to be told in a story. Even your final destination, the underworld, reinforces this lesson. The gray, memoryless eternity of the asphodel meadows is the great equalizer. The strivings, the passions, the triumphs, and the tragedies of your life are all washed away in that bleak, twilight realm. The only thing that survives is a great name, a story told by the living. But you know that the price of such a story is almost always a life of immense suffering. You would rather have a peaceful life and a forgotten death than a tragic life and a famous one. You will not be Achilles, who chose a short, glorious life over a long, unremarkable one. You will choose the long, unremarkable life every single time. Where history whispers you to sleep, you choose the quietest whisper of all, the one that fades into silence. So, what does a good life look like in this world? It is a life lived in the margins, in the shadows of the great epics. It is a life of simple rituals, tending the hearth, honoring the household gods, pouring out a libation before you drink. It is a life of strong community ties, knowing that your family and neighbors are your only real defense. It is a life of careful, measured words and actions, of avoiding extremes of both pride and despair. It is a life dedicated to the small, achievable goals of raising a family, harvesting enough food to survive the winter, and passing on your simple wisdom to your children. The ultimate aspiration is to be like a stone at the bottom of a river. The great currents of myth and history, the epic struggles of gods and heroes, will flow over you, but they will not move you. You remain solid and unnoticed, while the turbulent waters rush on to their dramatic, inevitable sea. You live, you love, you work, you die, and the poets never sing your name. And that, in the terrifying, beautiful, and utterly unfair world of Greek mythology, is the greatest victory a mortal can ever achieve. To be overlooked is to be saved. To be forgotten is to be free. You have walked a long and weary path tonight, through a world of shadows and fear. You felt the coarse wool on your skin and the gritty bread in your mouth. You've navigated a universe where the gods are your landlords and monsters are your neighbors. It was a world where survival depended not on being strong or brave, but on being invisible, on mastering the art of being utterly and completely unremarkable. The struggles of these ancient people, their constant negotiation with a hostile cosmos, feel so distant, and yet the echoes of their resilience are a quiet testament to the human spirit's ability to endure. As our story fades, feel the weight of that ancient anxiety lift from your shoulders. Acknowledge the incredible peace of your own quiet room, the profound safety of your modern world. There are no gods peering through your window, no oracles whispering riddles of your doom. Your fate is not written in the stars, but in the choices you make each day. The greatest luxury you possess is the freedom from that kind of fear, the simple, beautiful, boring peace of being safe. Let the memory of their world be a soft, distant hum, a reminder of the quiet strength it takes to simply live. Let their stories dissolve into the stillness of your rest. You are safe now. You are warm. And you are here in your own time, under your own peaceful sky. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, but here, drifting deeper and deeper into a well-deserved, peaceful sleep. Let the past sing you to sleep, and dream of nothing at all.